This talk is going to be about the bladder in late life. And of course, as we all sit here, stuff is going wrong. Aging is, in the effect on the biological system, accumulated deficits. Fortunately, none of us here, hopefully, have enough stuff going wrong for that to be critical. The 100-year-old marathon runner, although very successful, has not got nothing wrong with him. He's just got nothing that's going to make him fall down and drop dead. The lifespan of your kidney, all things being equal, is about 118 years if you look at podocyte excretion rates. It is likely, therefore, that the bladder has a similar life cycle. But unfortunately, as we live with our bladder, as most of us do, things are going wrong. The accumulated deficits are taking their toll. Hopefully, none of them are enough for things to go wrong, but we deal with people who have. The bladder seems to have a limited repertoire of responses to things going wrong. It can become overactive, or it gives up. And that really colours my talk. But let's have a look. This is taken from a recent review. I'd like to acknowledge the collaboration of my colleague, Dr. Gibson, in a Nature Reviews Urology. What's physiology? What's aging? What's pathology? I have no disclosures related to this presentation. So we know there are more lower urinary tract symptoms as people get older. The problem with all of the data that I'm going to show you is that many of the data are cross-sectional. Many of them come from people with symptoms, and we have a paucity of longitudinal data. We also have a paucity of data in what you might describe as physiologically normal older people. And that's a problem in our interpretation. So take everything I say with a slight pinch of salt. So aging is a manifestation of stuff happening, not just the passage of time. And of course, as more of us survive into very late life, more of us will reach that later life with a number of accumulated deficits. And for many, that will include the bladder. The inflammaging theory suggests that we are being subjected to a constant bombardment of things to which we respond by low-grade inflammation. You will have seen these things around myocardial infarction. You will see where dental disease is related to ischemic heart disease. Low-level inflammation is probably not good for you. So this accumulated lifetime exposure to antigens leads to an upregulation of our cellular and humoral responses. And we get more cytokines, interleukins, and inflammatory meters, which themselves cause damage. So the drivers of this may be incompletely apoptosed and cleared breakdown cells from our cells, the newly investigated microbiota of the gut and other non-sterile sites, and we know more now about the urine and the bladder microbiome than we do before, and senescent cells themselves. So, like many of us, unfortunately, the bladder develops a middle-age spread. The bladder mass increases in association with age. This has been shown well back in 1978 in women, not significantly statistically significant in men in this study, but that may be because you get true detrusor muscle hypertrophy in response to prostatic obstruction. So in the unobstructed aging human bladder, detrusor smooth muscle structure does not seem to undergo morphological change in association with aging. More collagen, more elastin, and lay down a connective tissue, which results, of course, in the idea of impaired contractile function, not impaired contractility. And we hear time and time again our colleagues talking about detrusor contractility, and it is not contractility, it is contractile function, because this is a whole system, not a muscle. And the detrusor muscle contractility we will know more of in a moment. The nerves seem to go. This is a generic gastrointestinal, lower urinary tract phenomenon by staining for acetylcholinesterase, or looking at the number of nerve endings, they appear to be reduced in later life. And the magnitude of nerve-mediated contractions declines with increased age in bladder outflow tract obstruction, idiopathic and neurogenic detrusor overactivity, but not in those without bladder dysfunction, despite a seeming paucity of nerves from many studies. But those older studies, of course, the underlying pathological classification and determination was never accurately made. But so in some of changes, they seem to be pathological rather than age-related. So here we go. Detrusor contractility is unchanged in association with aging, out with the existence of true detrusor overactivity. There is no age dependence of detrusor contractility in response to carbachol stimulation, but there is for agonists where there is detrusor overactivity. So detrusor contractility appears to be preserved. But then you'll say, well, hang on, why then is contractile function impaired? Notwithstanding obstruction, but it seems to be the dampening of the conduction of force by that accumulation of non-contractile tissue in the middle-aged spread bladder that prevents efficient voiding. Systometric data we know well. We have an increase in the post-void residual volumes of urine because the bladders empty less well. We have decreased urinary flow rates in both men and women, probably a reduction in bladder capacity. Again, the studies which suggested this didn't exclude those with detrusor overactivity, who definitely do have reduced systematic bladder capacities, and there is a reduction in sensation of filling. Longitudinal data from men without established lower urinary tract lower urinary tract symptoms show exactly that maximum urinary flow rate falls and mean more voided volume likewise. If we quickly look at the urethra, we see the same loss of the urethral rhabdosphincter in association with aging. The two cross-sectional studies, both cadaveric, show not only that there's a linear age-related reduction in striated muscle cells, and as we know, the maximum urethral pressure decreases in association with aging. A change observed even in nulliparous women, and we've heard here about the vasculature and the urothelial lining being important in closure pressures. Older women with stress urinary incontinence have even lower maximum urethral closure pressures than their counterpart age-matched sisters, but not an increased incidence of stress urinary incontinence. We know about the prostate. It changes. There seem to be two mechanisms. We'll go over that. And we see an age-associated significant increase in the levels of non-neuronal acetylcholine released from the urothelium in aged animal models. But hang on. The changes in vasculature, the fibrosis, the ischemia that we now know more about, and we see generating bladder pathology also affects the control mechanisms of the bladder. So the accumulation of white matter hyperintensities in the CNS is well recognized to be associated with aging. They're almost ubiquitous. And people with a higher white matter hyperintensity load show a greater prevalence of detrusor overactivity and increased difficulty in main incontinence on cystometry than those people with a lesser degree of white matter hyperintensities. So older people's OAB, I think we're getting a little closer to starting to subdivide those people, as Steve says. Can we now think of, you have got vascular OAB, and vascular incontinence has been well recognized and described by the Chiba group. So, in conclusion, lower urinary tract symptoms may well result from pathological changes within the urinary tract itself, changes in the nervous system resulting in changes in peripheral or central neurological control, or systemically. But their presence implies a pathology that might be amenable to treatment. There remains a notable dearth of data on normal aging, and that's a shame. There is no lack of any systematic analysis using animal models and few data from humans. But are we going to change things? And I think it's down to people in Steve's area to take aware of preventive mechanisms, the healthy aging paradigm of normal BMI, drink moderately, mistake there last night, Bill, don't smoke, exercise. We're seeing a reduction in the incidence of Alzheimer's disease. I suspect we may, if we follow the same paradigm, see a reduction in the incidence of these kind of problems in later life. If we all get out there, walk home, don't drink too much, don't smoke, and keep our weight down. Thank you.